Hello and good morning. It might not be good morning for you, it might be afternoon when you're listening to this. Welcome to the Sociology Staffroom. I'm Katie Tyler and I've got my guest today, Kerry Stoten, who has a wealth of knowledge within sociology. You're a subject lead of social sciences, coordinator of UCAS, a current half marathon trainer or trainee, or sorry, you're training for the half marathon, and also part of the team for TMI Cons, which obviously many of our sort of listeners will have come across as well, for sociology. So I'm here to pick your brains about UCAS of all things. So thank you first of all for willing to come in to speak to us on this rainy morning today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's quite nice to be chatting to someone I've actually met in person.
Yeah,
Where we met,
you do
wasn't
lots of
it?
people. Yeah, as we met at a Tim Icons event, didn't we? And I know that like I
Yes.
sort of got to speak to you there, and I sort of sometimes it's nice because I speak to a lot of people virtually. And I'm sure you do as well, but actually it's nice to speak to you in person. So we're not here to talk about, although I'd love to ask about your training in regards to your running, but I'm going to come to sort of talk about UCAS. So it's a bit of a weird time to talk about it. I was thinking I booked it in. And it's sort of at the end of the cycle as such, isn't it? The sort of deadline is looming. And so I suppose this is really I suppose it's more of a reflective conversation, potentially, for people that have just finished the UCAS process. Or for those people that are thinking, do you know what? I'm going to be doing this again in a couple of months because we know how the sort of academic year starts. So before you know it, it's that time again. And sort of rather than sort of embarking on the process, thinking to yourself, well, actually, what things could I take stock of from maybe yourself or own personal reflection, or people that are new to the process, really. So I'm really here to pick your brains. One, because obviously you're a sociology teacher and a sort of coordinator of the social sciences, but also as a UCAS coordinator. So I suppose my first question is to you, what is the goal as a subject, especially if we're talking from a perspective of a subject reference point of view? What is the goal? Like we've got this student. What is our goal in order to do this?
Can I actually put that question on hold for a minute?
Yes,
And
that's
just talk
perfect.
you through how we do our UCAS process and a bit of context as to what I'm coming from, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So my experience is just of the school I work at. I've only ever worked at that school for 15 years. We're an 11 to 18 school, and I know that there'll be people out there who teach sociology who work in colleges. So I don't know how transferable my information is. I can only talk about the context that I'm from, we're in quite a deprived area, and aspiration can be quite low sometimes. So that's one of our challenges that we have to work on. In terms of the process, I guess we formally start it in June of year 12, although I do a little bit in September of year 12 where I talk to them about what the process is, just to kind of get them to think about, are they on the right courses? Do they need some work experience? I think that's something that we need to develop more. I want to be doing a lot more in year 12, which is something that I'm sort of reflecting on at the moment, that I want to do that with my students. So anyway, yes, so we start last year we had a careers week in June across the sort of school, where we started doing research. We started looking at our personal statement. Even without a careers week, I would always start the UCAS process across all of my students, not just my sociologists, in June. And then in sort of September, that's the time when it starts to ramp up. I try and get their drafts sort of in October half term. We do have the odd, we don't have loads of Oxbridge, but we have the odd sort of entry. We've had 5 Oxbridge applicants this year. We only have about 30 students who apply through UCAS anyway. We're quite a small sixth form. So that's kind of where our process is. We do a lot of it through the Google suite. We're a Google sort of school, so everything is done through Google Classroom. And the way in which our references are written, so in sort of late September, our teachers complete a UCAS report, a subject report. So that's what I will do as a sociology teacher. That's what the physics teachers will do. And then I take all of those and put those together as part of one bigger reference. through our we have Arbor, that's our sort of system, so it's all done through our reporting system. So that's kind of like the process, I suppose. In terms of the goal, what do I want to see from a sociology teacher? I would want to see from any teacher, to be honest, that their reference is really tailored to that student and is really tailored to what they want to apply for. So I was having a little think about the subjects that sociology year 12 and 13s would be applying for. And I've had a few apply for sociology, but actually the vast majority have been more social sciences, wider than just sociology. So if I'm thinking about my current year 13s, I've got one applying for I had to write this down because I couldn't remember. Child and adolescent mental health, nursing, midwifery, social work, teaching, criminology, counselling, speech and language therapy, forensics, so they're not necessarily just applying for sociology, but I think sociology is such a big, wide subject that it can apply to such a range of degree subjects. So it's about tailoring your reference, taking the bits of sociology to make them relevant to the degree they want to do. So, for example, I teach health and social care as well. I have a lot of students that do both. So I have a lot of students that go for things like nursing. So I would be writing something like, they have an understanding of equality and diversity and how that impacts on life chances, just trying to pull out the bits of sociology that are relevant to nursing or criminology or whatever. Is that okay?
Wow, I just it's really important because actually, like, I think the thing you mentioned first was, it's going to be different in different schools and when they start that process. And I think the goal, from what I'm getting, is really sort of, it's not a generic. Although there is a sort of generic process that might happen, whether that be June or early for students in year 12 and going into sort of September, October time into year 13. And this is something that seems to be a common theme that keeps coming up, whether we're talking about UCAS or I've talked previously about Ofsted and deep dives. Yesterday I spoke to someone about managing a department. It's knowing your students, and that seems to be the common theme. So when you're writing a reference, or the goal of the reference isn't just to be like, copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste. And if it's going to take a little bit more time, and that's sort of thinking about, maybe it's something I'm sort of a leading question I'm going to ask in a minute, is knowing your student and what they're applying for, and then finding those transferable skills across your subject. So a bit of sort of mapping, like you said, thinking about, health inequalities potentially. Obviously, if you've taken health as an option, that's going to be more transparent. But then obviously health inequalities in health will come across through other units as well, and obviously the criminology, crime and deviance potentially. So really sort of signposting those bits. I remember speaking to someone about oracy not so long ago, and she was sort of saying exactly the same thing, that you might write in a UCAS report, what do you say, like, contributes to class discussions. Well, what does that mean, like, and how could you actually highlight that to the university? Clearly, I know you said that you mentioned that you started sort of in June, but sort of reflective for you, wish you want to add more in September for year 12. Why is that so important? Why is that the reflection that you've made in that sort of for this year?
Because I think one of the most important things that I try and say all the time in my school is that you need to make sure students are on the right courses early, and they need to be aware of if there are any work experience requirements. So things like social work, paramedic science, which again I've had students go into from sociology, they often will have specific work experience requirements. And if the student doesn't realise that till the end of year 12, then that's making their life very, very difficult. And I just think it's a really important conversation to be having all the time, and just sort of drip feeding that in all the time. So yeah, I think as early as possible, not necessarily formally doing the UCAS process, but just sort of having it on their agenda a little bit. I think that's really important.
Yeah, the backbone, because that was one of my questions is how early is too early to start the UCAS process? And like you said, not necessarily formally, like writing out a personal statement or looking at universities, but ultimately that sort of drip feeding approach. And I suppose I was funny enough, I was talking to students about this the other day, and I was talking about research and bringing it into research methods. And I was sort of saying that, universities aren't just about teaching sociology, whatever degree you want to do, but the research they are doing, and actually that might influence where you go, and showing the liveness of sociology, that lots of universities are carrying out live research at the moment, and sort of as part of enrichment looking at that, and that might impact on whether they want to go to that university, they want to be part of that research potentially, or they like the lectures that are teaching there. I was also thinking about this in regards to sort of how you tie it into lessons without it being so formal. Obviously, to their drip feeding. How, as more as a sort of, I suppose there's two sort of jobs you've got there, is obviously as a coordinator of sociology, or the head of the lead subjects of the social sciences, but also as a teacher of sociology. Is there any sort of systems or anything you put into place to sort of start drip feeding, or is it something that's under consideration that might be useful, or is it more organic than that?
I think that is an area of development for me personally, if I'm being really honest. But there is stuff done across our school more generally. So all of our year 11s went out on a university visit recently. Personally, I think it needs to start in year 7, really. That again, drip, drip, drip that message through. For example, I went into year 9 assembly just before Christmas to go and sell sociology, GCSE. I mentioned university then. When I went into year 11 assembly, we've got year 9 options evening next week. So year 8 options evening. Yes, sorry, confused. But yeah, we've got an options evening next week. I will be mentioning university then in front of parents. I always say sociology is a very good subject if you're thinking about university. It's, I guess, drip feeding that message that that university is an option really, really early. I'm going to go into year 9 and year 11 forms in the next few weeks, again, just to go and chat about university, sixth form, that kind of thing. So I probably do more in terms of UCAS Coordinator than I do as a sociology teacher. In terms of the sociology, though, I was having a little think about this, and I was thinking about it's those links to academic study. God, brain's gone low. So one of the things I've been using a lot is your talk that you did on sociology outside the classroom. So I started having a slide in my lessons in year 12 of sort of academic things that they could go and read or watch or listen to. The sociology show is an excellent resource. So sometimes I get my students to go and listen to that, because that's academic study. It's academics talking about their work. So what better way of kind of inspiring the students by academia? See, I can say
it. No, definitely. I think it's something that, like you said, is drip fed. And I sometimes think I know that I'm sort of conscious of as one of the things I sort of think sociology has to be outside the classroom, because it isn't something that can be contained within the classroom. But like, I know that Matt, who does the sociology show, he also has student takeovers so that students can contribute as well. So it gives sort of I suppose that sort of focus for the students, so that they can also contribute as well as obviously listen as well. And obviously I think as well, thinking about maybe, like from the academia or the academic point of view, is a lot of universities do those webinars and sort of like sending those out. And I think it's just, I think for me, it's just putting a sort of reminder on my calendar, is thinking, right, on this day every month, I'm just going to sort of search sort of universities local to me, because that's where the sort of limit is, because obviously students can't necessarily visit all the time. But if it's webinars, it's a lot easier. But sort of highlighting, just check when they're doing their webinars, or subscribe so that I get that bit of information, so you can sort of share that with the students. But I definitely agree with you. I think it's that drip feeding. I think sometimes I feel like that UCAS process happens so quickly. I feel like you start it, and then before you started it, it's like the deadline, and then we've always got those students that at the end, like it's November, they've got people whose hands, and then this last week over Christmas and stuff, and you're nodding your head there and going like,
Yeah.
And I think with all the goodwill in the world, even if you started it on the 1st of September in year 12, there was always going to be those students.
Yes.
But it's keeping, I suppose, that momentum going. I was going to ask you a question around, like you saying you got to know your students really well. Do you sort of recommend, or do you do anything where as a subject teacher, I know that often people who write the report gets information about what they do outside of school, but also as a subject teacher, do you make a point of finding out what the students want to do? Is it a form that you get them to fill out, or do you do a sort of quick interview with them, or
So I just get them to do a really quick Google form that I share with staff. But I know that there are some staff, like I know my students really well, but my colleague who teaches health and social care, she does it brilliantly. She sits down with each student, talks to them, looks at their sort of their exam and coursework grades, kind of works out what they need to do to get where they need to be, and does a mini interview with them as a subject teacher. I tend to do it a bit less formally than that. I might have a little bit of a chat with them here and there. She does it quite formally, and her UCAS reports are much better than mine, to be honest. Very detailed, very tailored. So I guess it depends on what your relationship is like with your students. I'm quite an informal sort of person anyway, so I will just tend to chat to them. And I do that as part of when I'm doing my UCAS reports, that, I make sure that the students know what their predicted grade is, why. That will be based on usually a combination of teacher assessment, and we do end of year 12 exams. So it's kind of based on those two things. But I think it's really important to have a lot of conversations with your students, not just here's a grade, it needs to be a conversation, definitely.
Yeah, because that's something I wanted to ask you about, the sort of the UCAS prediction grade as well, and also maybe elaborate a bit more. Like you said, it has to be a conversation, but definitely getting some sort of right to doing the reference with the student. So that might be something more formal, like your colleague does as an interview, or a sort of ad hoc thing. But yeah, I think that communication is so important, isn't it? Because actually, the earlier you know that information, sometimes you can signpost students to that. So I know that one of my students, she wants to be an accountant. So I don't know if I'm even saying it right with I say to the students, I don't know enough about maths, but I'm like, we're doing some data today, like that might be useful for your accountancy. But so once you get to know your students, obviously it depends how many students you're teaching, but if you've got that in the back of your head and you think, I know that student wants to become a medic, for argument's sake, or I know that student wants to get into teaching, you can sort of think about it, signpost it in the lesson a little bit, potentially, on a more ad hoc basis.
Absolutely.
But you did say about these UCAS predictions, and you said that obviously a conversation, because I know that can be really quite a challenging experience, the whole UCAS predictions, because they are just a prediction, aren't they?
Yes.
Because actually we don't really know what the students are going to get really till 100%. You've got an idea because of all the data and etc. But it's still put in at a time, roughly November time, which is still quite a long way before. I mean, every school's different, but fairly early on in year 13, and obviously there's still lots of scope for students to improve or not, potentially. So obviously you said it's a conversation. Is there anything else to help that process feel a little bit, I don't know, not as scary for students, potentially?
So at the end of year 12, we have our year 12 exams, so the students have their grades from those year 12 exams, as we're doing our sort of UCAS introduction, so they can use that as a starting point. Again, raw data. We say to them, your predicted grades are coming a bit later, so you've got a bit of time to focus and work on them. But the other thing is, again, I've been very lucky. I've not really had any students arguing with me personally about predicted grades. But I think that you're right, that they come quite early. So for me, again, it's those conversations. I have been known to amend them personally if the student has shown that they are getting better, and that's why it needs to be a continuing conversation. That's why it's so important to talk to the students all the way through the process, I think.
Yeah, and I suppose it's been transparent with the whole sort of grading process from the beginning. I suppose even there was the assessments in year 12 and how the sort of, every school's going to be different of what data is contributing to that UCAS grade, whether it's just the end of year exam or is it sort of other sort of homework assessments or whatever. So yeah, I suppose it's like you said, it's those communicational elements. Just another question. I feel like I'm just picking your brains. I'm like conscious of time, and I'm thinking, oh goodness, I've got another question, Tony. With regards to, once you've completed the sort of reference, do you personally, I mean, obviously it's just a personal thing or within your school, and it's different for different schools, and they've got different policies on this, but it's just one sort of pick your brains on. Do you show the students a copy, or do you not?
Form tutors share the UCAS reports, but I don't share the overall UCAS report. Having said that, though, the UCAS reports that I write are a working thing between me and the student. I don't necessarily know all the students that well. So I know my sociologists and my health and social care students. Do I know the psychology students? No. So what I tend to do is I get them to do a little Google form for me, where they give me sort of ideas of things, or if they have got something that they want me to put in. So sometimes some students have got special educational needs, and I say to them, would you like me to put something in about that in a positive way? Because obviously it says earlier on in their UCAS form that they have got ASD or whatever, if they've chosen to put that on. So I ask them if they want me to put a comment. So although I don't let them see the entire reference, which is more for practical reasons, to be honest, than anything else for me, it's not something that is completely alien to them either. I guess we're a bit of a halfway house with that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, because I think there's scope for both ways, isn't it? Because I think if you sort of share it with the students, it, from a practical point of view, you're forever amending it, so it's like back forth, and I always say to the students, when you're looking to speak to student teachers about even what courses you've got to do, like, or what you want to do at university, and speaking to people, it's being purposeful who you're speaking to, because ultimately it's their decision, and obviously you've got family and friends and stuff, and I think the more that people that contribute to whether it's a decision what university you want to go to, or a course, or whether you're writing a reference for someone, everyone's got their perspective. It's the same when they're doing their personal statements. It's like everyone's got a sentence they'd like to change, and it can take forever. But at the same time, it's got to be, like you said, a little bit collaborative, because obviously sometimes you don't know what the students are doing outside of school, especially if you're coordinating the whole reference as you're doing. Any final top tips? Anything sort of that you can think, right, I've learned this from this year or from previous experience. You think, do you know what? I'm gonna do more of this, or I'm gonna do less of this. Anything sort of, any takeaways as well?
I'm going to change. I'm going to do more top tips for some of the students, I guess, which is thinking about preparing. So before the summer, thinking about that enrichment, that sociology beyond the classroom. So making sure they can show a passion for sociology or criminology or whatever. So sometimes I think with sociology, things like work experience, they think, I can't go and be a sociologist. Well, yeah, but if you've got a job at a fast food restaurant, for example, which some of my students do, well, you're seeing things like hierarchy. You can use that. But yeah, getting them to do wider reading. I really like the use of Future Learn and the Open University free courses. There's loads linked to sociology, there's loads linked to health and social care, there's loads linked to everything, to be honest. But I think that's a really good way of them being able to show a bit of passion that they've gone in their own time and done an extra little course. That's always a really good thing. Thinking about their EPQ as well. If your school does that, ours do. At the beginning of year 12, I always say to them, do your EPQ on something that links to your career, because, that's such a good tool to use in your personal statement. But in terms of top tips for sociology teachers and writing references, talk to your students, find out what they want to do, and be specific. So take sociology and link it to the degree course they want to do. And actually, I've got another tip for students whilst I'm thinking about it. One of the things I always get my students to do, one of the things I always get my students to do is to have a look at their favourite course or their favourite couple of courses and nick some keywords off the website. and kind of weave them into their personal statement. So if they've got academics at the university they really want to go to that are interested in, I don't know, poverty or something, try and weave that in some way, you know, where have you learned about that? Why are you interested in it? That kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. But I always say to the students as well, be mindful not to say something that you're not prepared to talk about in an interview, because you never know. I mean, not all courses, obviously, sociology degrees don't tend to have interviews, but like you said, for the health and they're like nursing courses or whatever, or a teacher potentially has an interview, they go, I really like the works of, I don't know, Durkheim's, I don't know, I was about to say religion or whatever. And they're like, oh, tell me what you thought on and you're like, so yeah, I think I think it's really important, because I go, well, how many journal articles you read? Just the abstract.
Yeah. I think it's also good if they can read things that are a bit more contemporary as well. You know, I really like Gang Leader for a Day. That's my favourite sort of sociology book. So something like that, which is quite accessible, easy to read, and is really interesting. So yeah, I think, and I think podcast is another good one, because they can do something else at the same time. I do like a podcast myself, I have to say.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But there's so many as well that are not actually so necessarily sociological, but you can weave or apply the sociological. They're not, in the sense they're not intended to necessarily be sociological, but then you can. It's the same with, like, I always think it was comedy. Like, I don't know, a comedy is a really good reflection of what's going on in society, and then so you're watching something, you can make those lines. I suppose more for my age group rather than the students would be something like Motherland. It's so sociological. It's unbelievable. But yeah, definitely some really great ideas. I know we've just come to the end of the UCAS and you're thinking, I want to put that to bed, I've just finished, I've got them all sent off, but we're back on it again. But I think sometimes it's at this sort of lull period for UCAS, it's quite nice to think, you know, actually I've just finished that process, but what do I want to do now? Like, where do I want it to go for the next year 12 students? Because before we know it, it will be the summer, won't it?
Yeah, I think Oh, sorry. I think now is the time to be doing those sociology beyond the classroom type things. This sort of, it's not quiet, but between now and the summer, or now in September, this is when you get your students to do their enrichment, their things that can show passion for sociology or whatever.
Oh, definitely. There's a whole bounty of stuff on Netflix they can be getting themselves through. Definitely. So it's all those sort of things that they can sort of incorporate. It doesn't even have to be something highly academic necessarily. It could be the shoe-in to then get them to read something else, maybe. I could talk to you forever about this. And I was thinking, UCAS isn't the most sort of like, you know, wow, sociology stuff, but actually, for some students, I think the word you used, and I think sort of to end on this, was the word choice. And I think that's a really sort of powerful thing. I think it's not that all students will end up going to university if they choose not to, but it's having that choice to go. I think that's really important, is that sort of equal opportunities of saying, look, this is available to you. And if you choose not to, it's very different from saying that it's not a choice and that's the reason why you're not going. I think that's really sort of the important bit of that. And I know lots of students would choose other avenues as well. But yeah, definitely the choice for students to go and feel fully informed on that. And the earlier it starts, the better, like you said, in year 7. So yeah, thank you ever so much. I appreciate your time. I'm sure I will cross paths again in the near future.
Yeah. No, I'm sure we will.
And enjoy your half marathon. That's me running, by the way.
I don't know about enjoy.
I'm sure you'll do fantastic. You take care, and thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.